All right, just so very quickly, you should really go back and watch my first episode to understand what stigma is and where it comes from in society. But if I know, like a lot of people are not going to go back and do that. So if you have not seen the first video, just real quick, stigma starts with like shame that someone feels about the way they're feeling, about feeling depressed or moody or irritable. So it starts there, and then society kind of amplifies that, and it really just leads to the fact that, like in the worst cases, stigma leads to people resisting treatment and not seeking treatment, and it's a lot worse of a prognosis for those individuals who wait. So before I get started, if you guys haven't watched my first video on what stigma is, just go back and I'll link it in the description so you guys can watch it. It's estimated that roughly half of people with mental illnesses never get help. And I mean, can you really imagine if that was the case for any other type of disease or illness out there? We call awareness to like every physical illness, every physical condition that you can think of. We donate to charity, or how everything is pink in October for breast cancer awareness month, but never once have I come across an advertisement for a schizophrenia walk or something of that nature. When it's estimated that 20% of the population has a mental illness or suffers symptoms from a mental disorder, I mean, you're talking about, I'm not sure of the exact number, but half of the people, or 20% of the people in the US is still a lot of people. And then to think of that 20%, half of them not getting help is just beyond comprehension for me personally, because there's help out there and the help has been proven to work. And it's just a damn shame that we have this stigma in society preventing people from leading the lives they could. I really think that a lot of what I'm trying to convey to you guys has a lot to do with the era and just the time in which we were born into. And I'm like referring to like social media and the internet and technology in general. But we see all these posts of others and we judge them we give them labels based on like their posts and what they're doing. And that's how we see people. That's how we know what's going on with our friends, with our family, whatever. But these, like, it's important, like, they're just the highlights of people only post the highlights of their lives on social media. And that's what we compare ourselves to. That's what we judge ourselves against. And when we can't live up to that, or we feel like we can't live up to that, it creates a lot of problems. I mean, there's dozens of like studies and research on how social media can negatively affect our mental health. I just did like a quick Google search and it came up with a bunch of different ways. But when you're feeling, for a lot of people, when they're feeling down or depressed or something upsets them and they're off for a little bit, what do? They go on social media and they post a picture of like life at a better time where they look good and they feel good about themselves, better than they do at that moment, looking for that positive reinforcement of the likes and the clicks and the comments. But all that's doing is putting a band-aid on it, putting a band-aid on like a gunshot. Because we think like the more likes, the more comments, the more shares, posts, views, whatever we get, the happier we'll be. But that's only temporary and it's not even real and it's insignificant in reality. So again, mental illness in general is not something you should be embarrassed about. How I said in a couple of the previous videos, like you might identify with some of the traits of some mental disorders, and that's because they're human characteristics. Everyone goes through what people with mental disorders and mental illnesses go through, just not on as much of a scale, all the time, but they're human traits and characteristics that are shamed and shunned in society. The first thing you can do is get yourself educated, more educated than even this whole YouTube series is making you. A really good way you can educate yourself further on the topic is by finding personal stories and personal accounts of what it's like dealing with specific mental illnesses. Just like a quick YouTube search can lead you directly to a bunch of different documentaries about specific mental disorders and specific mental illnesses that paint a better picture of what it's like to deal with these symptoms. In addition, I watch a lot of TED Talks. I really find those insightful and helpful. Um, and people with mental disorders, they're not like chained to their rooms and locked in their homes all day long. They go out and do things just like everyone else, and a lot of times they give TED Talks about what they're going through. So I enjoy watching those. Once you feel like you've got a good baseline of your understanding of mental illnesses, you go out and educate others as to what you've learned. Just thinking back to like growing up and my high school days and like kind of my friend group back then, we used to say things all the time like, "Oh, I'm gonna kill myself. This sucks," or "I'm depressed as hell," or "You're psycho. Stop being psycho. You're crazy." And this is where you can kind of like intervene and be like, "Hey guys, I'm like newly educated on things mental health related." And that adds to the stigma of mental illness in society, which has implications for people resisting treatment and leads to the overall misconception of what mental illness is in society. Now, you're probably going to get some snotty remarks and some weird looks, but they're not going to forget what you said. They're going to be like, where did that come from? Why is he talking about whatever? And so it helps. Like, you'll make an impact and you'll actually do something. Another kind of example of like the language and being just more conscious of it is like when we use the word triggered and saying, "Oh, he's triggered. Oh, blah, blah, blah. Oh, like that triggers me." But when you're kind of like making fun of like an actual word that is used to describe like a reaction for someone with a mental illness to something that like brings back memories or actually like induces their symptoms and or amplifies their symptoms, it's done in bad taste and it's something we need to be more conscious of. The next biggest thing you can really do to help is talk openly about not only your own mental health but listening to others and not having it be an uncomfortable topic, just by laying it on the table and facing it and acknowledging the fact that people struggle with things. Again, kind of going back to the social media and the world we live in today, everyone has this idea that you need to be perfect all the time and that if you're not okay, then something's wrong. But it's okay to not be okay. That's becoming kind of a more cliche term used today, but it rings true. Just by being open and honest with the people that you care about, the people closest to you, and having them be open and honest with you, it's going to help out a lot overall with the stigma in society and overall, and like it's going to better your relationship with that person rather than thinking like, "Oh, if I tell them how I'm feeling, they're going to go behind my back and tell everyone else." Like, that's really not realistic. They probably don't want that for you, and they really just want to know how you're doing so that they can help in whatever way possible. Now, I know I'm kind of speaking generally, and not everyone is that much of a saint and that nice and that friendly all the time, but if you don't feel like someone you're talking to is that kind of person, then you should be that kind of person for someone else. Finally, you need to speak up when you see something wrong or see someone being degrading towards people with mental illness. And that includes things you see on TV and in the media. You should let those people know, and you should use your voice to fight against it. So again, if you haven't watched the first video, that's gonna explain to you about ways you can really identify stigmatization in the media and society. So go back and watch that one, and then use your voice to speak up against it when you recognize it. I know I already said finally, but finally and finally, just not buying into the negative beliefs and perceptions that society holds about people with mental illness is the best way you can fight it for yourself. Especially when we're talking about something like self-stigma, which is where someone with depression kind of like labels themselves as depressed and not just a person who struggles with depression. They buy into that label and they start to feel as if it's their fault, and that's because society is pointing the finger directly at them. So educate yourself, educate others, speak out against it when you can, when you recognize it. Don't buy into the self-stigma belief. And I know that there was one more. Oh yeah, just being open and listening to others and being honest about mental health and just having everything on the table. All right, that's all I got. I've literally loved every minute of making this YouTube series. I really commend you for not only watching and helping me out with my project, but taking the time to learn more about mental illness, because you're going to help to bust the stigma. And yeah, like the video, share it, retweet it. I'm gone.